Sunday in September, Geshe will be starting with the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. That will be the new series that is starting in September. And along with the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, we'll be doing as a second subject, Geshe will be teaching on the Heart Sutra. So that's sort of the plans. And then the first highest Yoga Tantra teaching in the fall will be on the 21st, and that will be Vajrayogini. Also, keep an eye on our newsletter for Wednesday evening teachings on 16 guidelines for life. If you also have friends who are maybe interested in spirituality, but not necessarily formal Buddhist teachings, that could be something for them to check out. And I think Dave will let you know when his book group starts up again. I think this is starting up again in September. So that's all I have to say. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee. I'll invite Geshe in and we'll get started in about 2 minutes. So hello, everybody. I'll get the mic a bit closer to me, maybe. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. And can everyone hear Geshe all right? Okay, great. And anything else before we get started? Are we streaming and everything? Okay, I guess they're working on that. So maybe, so I see somebody motioning. Are we not loud enough? Do you want me to turn up the volume? Is that it? Is it okay for people? All right, okay, we'll just continue then. Let's see. So first of all, Tashi Dele to everybody. Geshe hopes that you are all well and he hopes that you are all happy. So our gathering together today, do this with the motivation that we are engaged in an activity that is of great significance, in an activity that is very important. So all of the holy beings indicate that the precious human rebirth which we currently have is something that it is extremely difficult to achieve or attain. And understanding that this is something that is extremely difficult to achieve or attain, we must be careful not to let it go to waste. So all of us, of course, it's very important for us to seek the happiness of this lifetime. And when we speak of the happiness of this lifetime, we speak about our mental and physical health on the temporary level. But what's important to also understand is that we call the self, that we call the I, does not cease at the end of this physical body, right? This is something that continues on.
오다 나로스 강가로로는 로와세하든 로와리 주요리 맞대 아니 가르세가래 오다자 체수 또 체수 니바 체수도 저거라레스.
So of course, when we speak about the different types of beings within samsara, we speak about 6 types of beings. And amongst those 6 types of beings, it is the human rebirth, which is considered the most beneficial, the most special in terms of spiritual practice.
오다 사세야지 더니 다 대화라 요아래라 저니 코코마스 코도 좀에 코스네 라 먹게 지시기와 니까라도 코알 데비깔 대시 첨부지레테네 이나요 니빠만노지 저기요 말스.
When we speak about the devas, the celestial beings, and the asuras, the demigods, and we talk about the devas of both the form and the formless realm. So in terms of samsara contemporary happiness, this is considered the So on the temporary level, the level of temporary happiness, the temporary happiness that those devas are capable of experiencing is greater than what we experience. But in terms of the power, the ability to apply themselves in spiritual practice, this is actually something that is much less. So if we are a human being, and we have this human rebirth, which is both precious and meaningful, then what are we to do with it? What is the task we need to engage in? Well, it's actually very clear. Without doubt, we can say, because we have this basic wish in our mind day and night, which is to be able to find a stable and lasting happiness, and to be able to avoid, to clear away, even the slightest suffering. So if that is what we are seeking, then we have to identify what that stable or real happiness is. And that stable or real happiness is the happiness that is achieved after moksha, after liberation, also known as the bliss of liberation. So then we might ask the question, liberation, the bliss of liberation. So liberated from what exactly? Liberated from both karma and affliction. Once one has been liberated from karma and affliction, the result is that one is able to experience then that lasting and stable happiness. And when we speak about unwholesome minds and we speak about negative karma, it's important to understand that these are things that are adventitious. They're adventitious, meaning they are things that can be removed, cleared away from our mind. So in order to be able to get rid of those adventitious defilements and karma, then the very most powerful ways to do that are by applying ourselves in the twofold practices of method and wisdom, supreme method and supreme wisdom. Gonda Jangshu Gisem Dang, Tony Tobeshera made up. So when we develop a high level of practice of the method side of the bodhicitta. Huh? Ale. Okay. When we develop a high-level practice of the method side of bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion, and when we develop a high level of wisdom, for example, the wisdom realizing emptiness, the analogy that illustrates their how they function is the analogy of fire, and that's an analogy we find especially in the tantric teachings. So when we look at fire, right, we see that this is a very powerful element. When fire is blazing, right, it can burn through trees, grass, other objects very, very quickly. So this is an example. So Geshe doesn't want people to think, oh, Geshe is saying that it's great when there's a fire that's burning stuff. It's an example, okay? So it's said that when one is able to stabilize bodhicitta and, right, the preparatory minds of love and compassion, and these become powerful, these become realization, then the power of these minds that have been brought forth are like a fire that can burn through previously accumulated negative karma. So that's one way to think about it as we relate it to the mind of bodhicitta, rooted in love and compassion. And when we think about the negative karma that we've accumulated, right, it is often accumulated in relation to somehow trying to seek some sort of advantage, or maybe a mistaken thought of helping those who are close to us, right, those whom we have close relationships with. But, you know, the main one, of course, the main one that compels us to negative karma is this attitude of self-cherishing, holding ourselves as preeminent, as the most important, and disregarding the needs of others. And bodhicitta is a very powerful antidote to that mistaken mind. And also, when we develop this bodhicitta, when we develop this feeling of closeness with others, there's a natural transformation, and our relationship between ourselves and others become more peaceful, more wholesome. And also, to be clear, purifying negative karma, unwholesome karma, is something that is very important. But is that the main task of a practitioner? No, it is not. Because we understand that what compels us to accumulate that negative karma is the afflictions. And out of the afflictions, the root of those afflictions or mistaken minds is the ignorance grasping at the self. And the positive mental quality that is able to burn through that false mind of ignorance grasping at the self, like a fire can burn through dry grass. This is the mind of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So wisdom realizing emptiness is simply a mind that is able to comprehend the final understanding of the ultimate mode of abiding. In other words, the final understanding of the way things really are.
다 나조 다 페게스페요 대신 얘네 페게 타신 바 롱게 된 타신 바 젠제 된 타신 바 소노 내가 이렇게 지나 다 대니 슈얼 세만도 다음에 받아오 지래.
So if one is seeking a lasting final happiness for oneself, if one wants to be able to contribute not only to one's own self-welfare, but to the welfare, to the well-being of others, then there are no things that we can cultivate other than these practices of method and wisdom. They allow us to do that.
다 나로서 밀리테 짜침벌에 세대 대니 가르저바 이나 다 밀린디 있더니 땜버치 전에 싸바지도 도요 이자 밀린디 짜침벌에스. 다 시라니까.
And one of the powers of this human rebirth is its capacity to cultivate the practices of wisdom and compassion. It is said that even if one does not possess imprints or latencies from previous lifetimes of these practices, one can newly arise these positive mental qualities as a human being. That's one of the qualities of a human rebirth. And it's a gradual process, right? The best illustration of this is of the great Indian Pandita Vasubandhu, who started, right, in terms of Buddhist philosophy with actually the lower school of tenets. But as he went through his life, his study and practice, he was able to discern the highest view of Buddhist philosophy.
오타코 세리 받지 바래 와서 뭐 마슈 대이나 저와 지인도 대내 원 저와 지인도 저와 같이 말해서 뭐 저지는
yeah.
저와 같이 로요에서 로이냐
yeah, so Vasubandhu actually was somebody whose views kind of evolved, whose views changed through his life, right? He wasn't dogmatic, but instead his views changed. He came to more thorough understandings as time went on.
오다 체리바 누지레 오다 체리바 이나 가서 텔 타타기 라야 타지 시라니 텔 빠지 가제 전화요 예대 통하지 마시에 통하지
So that's really the scientific way to proceed, isn't it, right? To sort of adjust one's views in accordance with one's understanding. And that's why we can say that the essential foundations of these practices of method and wisdom are actually quite in accord with scientific perspectives. It's not very much that the scientists will be able to find fault with. So if we are able to mix the practices of method and wisdom within our mind, we're able to activate the mind's full potential. We are able to access the mind's complete power or capacity.
So
this will be the best possible benefit that we can come to in terms of our mental health, and in accordance with our mental capacity and health improving, then our physical well-being will also often improve. So in order to be able to activate, to develop those positive mental qualities, we need to tap in to the mind's fundamental nature, its natural capacity of vastness and clarity. So in order to do that, we will meditate for a few moments. So just keep the mind in a peaceful state. So any thoughts that are distracting you, that are disturbing you, think that they dissolve just like clouds in a sunlit sky.
Lumepe, Jazo Chimbo no say, Jachimbo Kayubata, Hele, Jimmy, so much.
Think that my mind is like the ocean when the wind ceases blowing. It is tranquil, vast, and clear.
Chi Rujilla, Numa Meba Muji, a Sego Rujilla, and to me leva, Chichum, Zuma, Ruja Savas, Yaboji.
Think the nature of my mind, that pure, luminous nature, is very much like a glass of pure, unadulterated water, without any turbidity, without any particles in it.
Melon Mujichikara, Inata, Sekoro, Shatoba, Ritoba, Delatenita, Mishipa Kanapa, Satoba, Stanichio.
Think that the nature of the mind is very much like a mirror that can reflect perfectly, comprehend any object, based upon these clear and knowing qualities of the mind. All unknowingness, all ignorance can definitely be cleared away.
Tanazute Kaze, Tata Tanja Muji Yabote, Tato Shirak Shulata, Dembochini Tasso, Dotobazo, Tela, Tata you watch so much, so much.
So I think as much as possible, I'm going to take that fundamental nature of the mind, use its qualities to infuse it with the practices of method and wisdom, and develop those qualities. I make single-pointed requests to the holy beings for their blessings to be able to do this. So we'll do the recitation.
Yeah. Yeah,
Tumba jom den de jin je ba dra jom ba yan da bar zo be song ge re ba dang shab su Demba Dewar Shepa Jiten Gemba Kebudawe Kaloi Gyorwa Lana Meba La da mi nangi temba sangye jondende be jawa shai gyai tu pala cha ze lo che de kyab su chi ho Tenpa chom den de
Deje cheba da chomba yang da ba zobe zonje re ba dang sha so denpa dewa
Shepa
jide chemba
Shebu
jebu
Dewe
ne
Karo Jorwa Lana Meba
la dong mi nam ki den ba song ji jong den de be ja wa sha kya tu pa la cha se lo che de gyab zu ji Tumba chon den de jin che ba dra chong ba yang da ba zo pe song ge je ba dang xiao zu den ba de wa xie ba xie de jiang ba jie bu de wei ga lo ju hua la na me ba la dang mi nam gi den ba song ge chong den de pe jia wa sha kya tu ba la cha se lo che de gyab zu ji
Short mandala offering.
so ji gi jo ji do Rong ri ro ring ji ni gen ba di song ye me de bu wa no gu nama da je che par jo idam guru ratna mendala kamniriyatayami.
Refuge in bodhicitta.
Song ju je do zu ju ju na la
Zhang che bar du da ni gyao zu ji da gi chi nian gi be su nam gi zhou la pen ji re song ge zhe bar shu
Song ju
che dan su gi che nam la zhang che bar du da ni gyao zu ji da gi chi nian gi be su nam gi zhou la pen ji re song ge zhe bar shu che dan su gi che nam la zhang che bar du da ni gyao zu ji da gi chi nian gi be su nam gi zhou la pen ji re song ge zhe bar shu
뭐냐 다 틴티바지 다 도마 근데 다 근로가니까 조언한서 근로시다 저거 디와스 나로서 셀 콤바 쳔버지 마이다 엘시다 노마도 데모용기 아마르바스.
So we always talk about at the beginning of the session that the motivation is very important. And we always talk about establishing the motivation, right? Seltapa. So when we say establishing the motivation, why do we use that word? It's because our mind is not habituated towards these positive motivations. So as a beginner, we really need to take the time to establish them.
당한저 기보용 말다. 전주 셈바스 요알레스나요. 아니 세시 뭐와 또니 또 비시라서데 할레베 같이 뭐 베제도요.
Semke dene?
뭐와 또니 또 비시라서데.
So for the bodhisattvas as well, actually, when they engage with the session, they are also, even though they're advanced bodhisattvas, they still need to pay particular attention to the mind generation, to the dedication of the merits, and to bringing forth the wisdom realizing emptiness.
다 된다 가르세요 아래서는 다 나로서 다 뭐천델이나 소노도 다 고그래. 아니 다 시와 자좀 다 사야 뭐 길라. 아니 소소지보 나봐. 소소 간예나고 주주지 소노토네다 뉴뉴지 소노토네 내가 뭐 제사와레스.
So why is this the case, right? Well, especially with the mind generation, why is this so emphasized? Well, when we think about the long continuum of all of our previous lifetimes, we could say that the majority of those, right, what's kind of driven our actions or our values is narrow self-concern, a sort of self-cherishing attitude, or perhaps at best, a concern to seek the advantage of, those close to us, of those whom we like. So this habituation is deeply ingrained.
ngene tandichi sonotone deshi jido toyona daze pak ngene deshi koro dake saya mo chago da this is what they are.
So, if that way of thinking were a true source of happiness, we should have millions and millions of causes for happiness by now, but we see that that is not the case, right? So we can make an educated, understanding that that is not the case.
단다 알랭간조 지다 시험가 좀벌리면 단다 미가 단다 요바치 두아스 대지가 내가 셔도는 저와지 돈은 som바도 이지가 쇼로 소노지 돈을 내가 다제 손지 삼바파 루바고데요 아레스 이네잖아
루바고데요리스나
손지 삼바 몸보차데요 아레스 텐노지 내가 단다 제바 노지 som바도 이지가 쇼를 내가 잖아
야 되네
그래 손지 삼바 루바고데요 아레스 가가
루바콩데요리스나
가사카르 손지 삼바 차데요 아레스
네 러스 Sometimes you gotta ask. Just an unusual phrasing in my mind. Anyways, so if all sentient beings were able to kind of shift this attitude of self-concern and instead to put energy into the development of love and compassion, then we would have hundreds, thousands of new bodhisattvas developing all the time. And not just even thinking of others, we ourselves too would become bodhisattvas. We'd be a bodhisattva by last year or the year before that. We'd already be there, right? So that's why we talk about establishing the motivation. And when we speak about establishing the motivation, it's really changing our attitude, changing our way of thinking and the reasoning behind why we do things. So that's why we talk about lo, jang, right? And lo is mind and jang is training. And Geshe said, it's not some kind of mystery. This is really what training the mind is. So there's many trainings, right? We talk about the lo jang, which is training the mind, and then Geshe mentioned there's also the lu jang, the training the body. So Geshe said, there's those elevated kinds of training the body, like perhaps those of you who attend the yoga classes that we offer here sometimes. And Geshe said, also all those Olympians in Paris who are training those bodies, so training both the body and the mind. And actually, when we come to a high level of, in the Vajrayana, a high level of tantric practice, right? Then the lujong, the training the body, especially working with the prana or the energies, this becomes more and more important, actually. So Geshe said that when we come to Tantra, right, we start to work with the winds because we understand, excuse me, that the mind rides on the winds just like the jockey rides on his or her horse. And so the connection between the mind and winds, or Geshe said, if you think about it as mind and energy, that connection between mind and energy, even science actually might begin to understand that a bit. So as we train in Tantra, a big part of that is working with the prana or with the winds. And right now, the prana or the winds are kind of firing all over the place. So what we do is we kind of dissolve the winds into a central point. Yeah.
초매바 강가 시도인 거라.
So when we dissolve the winds into the center and we focus on dissolving the winds into the fundamental mind, then so much of the kind of distraction, the perturbations, the lack of perturbations, the lack of focus, right? These will kind of dispel.
할래 내서 지야 첨벌했어. 난 도이쇼를 이는 셰바보 강가 저 세례도 생각죠. 세대 운시도 이시니거는 이시대 저가.
So in sutra, we say that the doer of all is the mind. And when we speak about the mind, we can speak about it in terms of consciousnesses. And then we talk about the sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. And so the mental consciousness would be the main one here. But when we come to Tantra, we don't say that the main doer is the mind any longer. In Tantra, the main doer is the subtle wind or the prana. So a lot to kind of, we can go on this digression. Geshe said he doesn't want to digress too much, but there's a lot to learn about the subtle wind and mind. It's a lot to learn about that. But the point is, when we really focus on developing our motivation and we bring forth a beneficial mind, then that can be something that is longer lasting. And the longer that mind of benefit arises, the more continuous of a rain of merit, of a rain of what is positive will be following. Yeah. But we know that mind that wishes to benefit, for example, or another positive mind that we may try to establish, if we immediately try to bring it forth when the mind is distracted or the mind is disturbed, we're not able to bring it forth in a very powerful or stable way. Yeah. So even if you have a very high quality apple or orange seed, if you try to plant it in a soil that is dry, rocky, and so forth, it won't be able to bring forth its yield of fruit. So we will take a moment to try to settle the mind and to clear our mental continuum of any unwholesome thoughts or feelings. Any negative or unwholesome mind that is arising, I'm going to try not to grasp at it, not to pay attention to it. And when the mind is settled, all the particles are settled to the bottom, we can think that the mind's fundamental nature, its nature of neutral equanimity, clear and vast, is manifest. And so then think this mind, which is like a monkey jumping from branch to branch. I'm going to tie that monkey to the pillar of mindfulness. I'm going to tie it to the pillar of mindfulness using mindfulness awareness meditation on the rising and falling of the breath.
내 저것에 군쪽에서 소바가라 이나요 거 레버 이나요 지도 맞이나 건설레가 지도야 못했어.
And having developed this focus, even if distractions related to attachment or anger arise, do not panic. Simply make the decision that I'm not going to follow those unwholesome, distracting minds.
가시 때에서 슈침뭐 땜번다고 레바이는 요 코로 미바지 보잖아. 코로 뭐 때에서 다니. 레바이는 거야는 못했어. 나 노도 그 세전다 레바이나 땜보. 코로 뭐 다니 레바이나 뭐 건설레 같이 하면 거기는 거였어.
Or we can think whatever distracting thought that arises, if I look at its nature, if I look at its true mode of abiding, will also dissolve into itself.
거기 자손은 요 나지 미바 윤중을 시작 셈. 노도 조매버지 바 이자손아 미바 윤중은 걸 시작.
And so then once we have been able to dissolve that distracting mind, our task is simply to return to the rising and falling of the breath. Think now the mind and body are different than before. They are more peaceful, relaxed, even. And within this vast mind and its qualities of clear and knowing, I am going to plant the most positive seed possible. Thinking of all sentient beings, looking at them with eyes of affectionate love, I think every single one is close to me. Every single one is my friend. Abandoning thoughts of attachment and aversion, seeing all these beings as close to yourself, bring forth a mind of love that thinks how wonderful it would be if they were able to have happiness and accumulate the causes of that happiness. Whether temporary happiness, whether ultimate happiness, bring forth the superior intention that thinks I myself alone will lead them to that happiness. But until I'm able to achieve the state of complete Buddhahood or full enlightenment, I won't be able to effectively lead them to that happiness. Therefore, for the welfare of all sentient beings, may I reach the state of perfect and complete enlightenment. Meditate on bodhicitta.
Ende to tore. Karasena roncinzi na yo lobo rendu. Nyamodo nyamo jabi pacha kanji na yo. Contenta which read the mat ko tempo de to keterem.
So think that definitely I can achieve this. Why? Because the factors that oppose this mind of bodhicitta, such as self-cherishing, these minds such as self-cherishing, they are not the true nature of my mind. They are adventitious. Similarly, the afflictions,
Nyamodo nyamo jabi pacha kanga karasi go meba. Lobo rendu mat contenta go.
and the afflictions, the mistaken minds, they are adventitious, which means that they are just like temporary guests. So we'll pause there. I'm just going to I'm just going to take a moment because I notice in my screen like maybe it's a little bit far away. I'd like to zoom closer in to Geshe, just so that the picture quality is better. So just give me a moment.
So the token
Yes. Okay. I think that, yeah, that is much better, I think. Okay.
Oh, tinti bachi. Ta tende yung toger. Sere sere nganzo ozu jane sita ba yene titsere tata page. There's got to do us. That you mutton and yar
So we know that these definitely these positive mental qualities can come about. How can we know that from our own experience? Because when we put in genuine effort, we're able to touch those minds a little bit. So if we're able to bring in that effort continuously, then we will be able to abide on these minds continuously, right? Certainly.
Oh, that dabota viseshi said pin ta mogoshi tsar kali lawari was.
Yeah, and then when we talk about the different types of bodhicitta, some of you will be familiar with this, right? We can speak of the king-like bodhicitta, for example.
Lotrapogan nojira, lotrapogata, tomale, tomboka, the Trisons you are married. Ya was a lesasona. Lotatashin balatania, well, let's us all tangajima. Gigi chaneta, pille capita, poche, something was true of us.
So the king-like bodhicitta, right? The bodhisattva aspires to achieve enlightenment first and then be able to help all beings and lead them there. It's very much like the approach we take with our education, right? You start in grade 1 and you're not thinking like, okay, I'm going to be a teacher. But as you go through the various levels of education and reach higher education, then you see, oh, as I draw closer to completing my education, then I'll have the knowledge to be able to become a teacher and to be able to benefit others.
Oh yeah, ta motors ta tende ji za te so ma no yi de ba she ba la ta gro pge. Uti ta ta ji gu ndu se na zo.
And in order to be able to actualize this wish, right, we need a path that is complete and unmistaken. And this brings us to the discussion of our text. Tambo Lamdrin revision. So we will begin with the text of the lamp of the path to enlightenment.
Oh yeah, that's such
So for those of you who are following along in the English, I believe we are on page 8, and we should be starting with verse number 36.
And so
the Lamdrin, right, the lamp of the path, is actually one of the most kind of precious texts imaginable. Yeah, so Geshe said, his thought was to kind of approach this text, right? It's sort of like our side topic in a way, but anyways, to approach it in kind of an easy way as sort of an overview. But then in the future, he'd like to give a very in-depth, detailed commentary on this text. So in order to reach this state where we can achieve our own welfare and contribute meaningfully to the welfare of others, it's important to engage in the practices of the 3 higher trainings. Lape lapa sumroat sudrim dang den so
Yeah, tema to.
Yeah. So ethics, concentration, and wisdom. This is very important.
Ta tunune ta da tsig la bi ka de ga yes nga so.
And so actually, we could say that we are still in the discussion of the higher training in ethics.
She to cho ji dan dun mi za cho wa da wo.
Mhm.
Cho wa da wo so ne la ta le da wo.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And so we'll also notice as we go through Lord Atisha's text that a lot of it is going to start to look like answers to questions. So it has kind of like a question and answer format.
Cho wa ji la.
Mhm.
Ani sho ju se de se to wo ma to so she wo sa ba she ya ma yes.
So one of the questions that's kind of embedded, it's assumptive, right? So like maybe not said explicitly, but it's assumptive behind the answer is, in terms of this mind of bodhicitta, the wish for enlightenment for the sake of all beings, is that something that can be newly arisen in the mind of an ordinary being who has not arisen it before? So in the sutras of the Buddha, it's very clear. Buddha Shakyamuni states this mind can be newly brought forth. And in fact, this mind can be brought forth within the continuums of all 6 types of beings within samsara or cyclic existence. Some scholars, though, dispute that should be taken literally. And they say that those beings lack the mental capacity to fully bring forth bodhicitta. However, they are able to bring forth minds that are similar to great compassion. And because great compassion is a root mind of bodhicitta, in some of the sutras, it looks like it is stated bodhicitta. So that's how some scholars view it. So we know, though, from the story of the previous lifetimes of the being who became the Buddha, that he first brought forth the mind of great compassion while dwelling in the hell realm. And when he first brought forth that mind of great compassion, immediately things started to change for him, and he began to draw closer to lasting, temporary, and ultimate happiness. So how can we understand that particular instance? Well, perhaps we can understand it as a profound imprint. And that's a really amazing thing to think about, because the work that we put in for those positive imprints could potentially ripen even within the hell realm. So then when we come to the tantric teachings, of course, we'll find that when it speaks about what ordinary beings are capable of bringing forth, not only does it say that it's possible to newly bring forth bodhicitta, but it says that within one body, within one lifetime, complete enlightenment is possible. Verse number 36, the merit of a single day and night gained by one with the higher knowledges is not attained within 100 lifetimes by one who is without them.
So
actually, this is a difficult point, because it's saying that if we want to work towards the welfare of sentient beings in the best possible way, we need to achieve these forms of clairvoyance in order to be able to do so. So one who lacks clairvoyance to completely discern the needs and affinity of beings, he or she may need to work for many lifetimes in order to bring them that lasting benefit. Whereas one who possesses clairvoyance can easily discern those needs and can benefit beings in a much shorter time.
Listen.
Yeah, Jason. So, nganso chenga dang ngunche truk trogrebe. So when we speak of these higher knowledges or types of clairvoyance, in the scriptures, there's a set of two lists. The first is the list of the 5 eyes, and the second is the list of the 6 types of higher knowledge or 6 types of clairvoyance. Shogichen, Yeshigichen. So in terms of these 5 eyes, I'll give them to you. I'll give you the list of those 5. So it's the divine eye is the first one. Number 2 is the fleshy eye. Number 3, the wisdom eye. Number 4, the dharma eye. And number 5, the exalted wisdom eye. So I'll give those again. Divine eye, fleshy eye, wisdom eye, dharma eye, exalted wisdom eye or primordial wisdom eye.
This one,
Shai Chenrebe. And so the fleshy eye describes like a certain type of higher knowledge that actually utilizes the eye sense consciousness and its sense support of the sense organ or the eye itself. And so one might ask, well, how does one come to that particular one of the 5 eyes? Well, it develops primarily through training in samadhi or single-pointed concentration. So also Geshe had mentioned the 6 types of clairvoyance or higher knowledge in the previous class, but we'll just give this list briefly again. And just to be very clear, these 5 eyes and the 6 types of higher knowledge or clairvoyance are attainable not only through Buddhist systems, they can also be achieved by non-Buddhist spiritual practitioners. It's actually said that at the time that the Buddha was kind of traveling around India, he encountered many beings who had achieved various types of clairvoyance. Sangye Yopa Konsul. And in fact, that is why many of the beings that Shakyamuni encountered were able to predict that, in the future, you will achieve this state of enlightenment and become the one known as the Buddha. And that's also why you encounter in the scriptures many stories about non-Buddhist teachers who, realized, I am not able to lead my students to everything that they need to achieve. So, and also maybe perhaps I will pass away. So upon my passing, they should study with the one known as the Buddha. Yeah, and so there's many stories of kind of non-Buddhist students having to wait many years to follow that instruction, but eventually encountering the Buddha. So out of these 6 types of higher knowledge or clairvoyance, the last one, the uncontaminated knowledge wisdom, that is only achievable by a foe destroyer. So therefore, in the non-Buddhist systems, that is not achievable. The other 5 out of the 6 are achievable through non-Buddhist systems. So sapa sepe, so it's the knowledge which destroys contamination. That's another story. That's a better translation. I didn't translate it so well at first. So the 6th one can be translated as the knowledge that destroys contamination. So how do we understand contamination here? We can understand that contamination is talking about the afflictions. Yeah. Yeah.
아니
Yeah. Chawa shepa ngunsun chawa shepa yeshe. Lai mikshe.
lai making is
Lai now yeshe. Paro gisem shepa ngundu sumpa.
바로 세시 빙해시
Yeah.
예세시
Yungi
빙해시
nesu. Yeah, yeah.
예세시 빙해시 엔진의 지스테 빙해시
Yes. So these types of we could say these other types of knowledge are the knowledge of completely penetrating activities, the knowledge of clairvoyance, the knowledge of clairaudience, the knowledge of knowing others' minds, and the knowledge of being able to comprehend the previous lifetimes.
This one, 다시 해도 내시 세대가 된 거로서 이제 대표가 이제 대표가
So these are important, right, in that very particular context of these types of clairvoyance or higher knowledge are going to assist us in achieving the welfare and working towards the benefit of others. And there's if you want a deeper explanation of these different types of clairvoyance, the 5 eyes and so forth, you can find this in one of the 5 texts of Maitreya, the Abhisamaya Lamkara, or the Ornament of Clear Realization. Yeah. And so the caveat here is Geshe is asking you to remember the advice that he gave you last time, because people get really excited about clairvoyance. What is more reliable, clairvoyance or valid reasoning? Valid reasoning is more reliable every single time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so to bring this point home, Geshe will remind you of a story from the time of a Buddha, where a very elderly man who seemed not particularly strong in mind or body said that he wanted to become a monk and enter the Sangha. And Shariputra and Moggallana, they had this type of clairvoyance that can discern previous lifetimes. And they looked and they said, you don't possess the roots of merit necessary. So it's better that you don't become a monk. He was so upset, right? He encountered the Buddha, but the Buddha saw that Shariputra and Moggallana's clairvoyance was not powerful enough. And in fact, there was a positive imprint in his mind, which would act as the root of virtue for him to become a monk. And so the seed of his liberation and the root of virtue that allowed him to become a monk, it was from many, 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 many lifetimes ago when he had taken rebirth as a fly. And that fly was sitting on a pile of cow dung where there was a very intense rainstorm. And through that intense rainstorm, the dung began to flow through a stream which circumambulated a stupa. And that was the imprint of merit that allowed him to become a monk. So it was said to be the stupa of Buddha Kashyapa, right? So it was many, 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 many eons ago, right? So Moggallana and Shariputra, they were not able to discern that. The Moggallana and Shariputra, they were foe destroyers. They were preeminent disciples of Buddha, really sophisticated minds and high levels of clairvoyance, but their clairvoyance was not sufficient enough to be able to discern that. Similarly, Moggallana, he had sufficient clairvoyance to be able to perceive that after his mother passed away, she was in a very difficult place, in a very difficult situation, but he wasn't able to pinpoint exactly where she was. And so then, in these cases, right, these disciples would approach the Buddha, and the Buddha, because of possessing that, not just clairvoyance, but omniscience, right, is able to discern where the person was, how this happened, and so forth. Yeah, so those are some stories related to that. Those who desire to swiftly complete the accumulations for perfect enlightenment will accomplish the higher knowledges through effort, not by laziness. So clairvoyance, these types of things are very important, but if you're just kind of like sitting around relaxing, if you're too lazy, you'll never be able to achieve them. And so we know that the laziness and the different types of laziness, that these are kind of acting as a hindrance to many of the things we want to develop, not just what's here. So we understand that in terms of what's blocking our accumulation of virtue, and really what's blocking our development of the positive mental qualities, and the big reason that we're not able to realize them, is this factor of laziness. And it's because whether we think about single-pointed concentration, whether we think about bodhicitta, whether we think about the final goal of complete and perfect enlightenment, laziness is going to be the main factor that hinders our achieving of those. And that is why in the beginning of instructions on any of those qualities, the Buddha begins by explaining their benefits, because an understanding of the benefits is an antidote to laziness. Yeah. And so then, when we talk about the different types, when we talk about the different types of obstacles to calm abiding, Chingwa Yeah. So that feeling of mental sinking, right? And that feeling of not wanting to engage with the object, this is also a type of laziness. So, we can say that mental sinking or laxity, as described in the teachings on calm abiding, this can also be connected to laziness. Yeah. So the internal practice, right, to get rid of that feeling of laziness and also to address mental sinking is to think of the benefits of one's object of meditation. There's also other things like putting physical objects upon one's ear or one's head and so forth. Then when they fall, one knows that one is experiencing sinking. So the So then another thing that's recommended is if one finds that mental sinking is very prominent, if laziness is just kind of like really putting a damper on one's will to practice, then it is advised, right, that the meditator should go to a high place with a vast vista, with clear air and so forth. So this is a very special kind of wisdom, because a dogged over application, pushing when one is tired, can be an obstacle to the practice. This is in the scriptures. It's one of the 5 powers. Specifically, it is the power of rest. So this is something that the experienced, that the scholars, that the meditators share with us.
다 this one. 다 뒤에 되게 띵해서 말에 수적을 나와도 차와네스.
So at this point, then, we can say that we have reached the conclusion of the explication of the first of these three higher trainings, higher training in ethics.
This one. 되는 거지. 다 띵해서 나온 거 추가레스.
So now we will come to a discussion of higher training in concentration.
신의 접바 마인비 내신주와 신의 접바 마인비 내신주와 먼저 위 뒤에서 신의 접이서 용도에 덤벼봐샤.
Verse number 38, the higher knowledges will not arise without the accomplishment of shamatha. Therefore, strive again and again to accomplish calm abiding.
다 신의 그게 야 매나 시에도 내시세한테 도야면도 데이터 다 신의 같이 못 쓰시고 왔어.
So this is one of the reasons that shamatha, or calm abiding, is so important, because if we don't develop that, then we won't be able to develop the types of higher knowledge which will allow us to effectively benefit others.
다요소노 아버지도 가르다서 어다 신에도 간절리라고 말was. 어다 이나요 때는 시부터 받자 첨보지라. 가서 시부터 말다. 관계 기회래. 시부터 받자 첨보지라. 아니 시에도 내시 토박 같이 못 쓰고요.
Kendang?
내시 주요로
Oh, right. Yeah.
내시 토박에 가자 시가래도 저주로로 로지샤 같이 뭐래스 그 just 말레스.
So just related to this discussion, Kebudambasu.
엘리멘트 제마서.
Sorry. Sorry. So there was a very holy being, a very highly elevated holy being, who was asked, is it more important to develop the 6 types of clairvoyance or to follow the practices of the lamp of the path to enlightenment? So he was directly asked this question. So Geshe said he can't remember the name exactly at the moment, but he was a Lama of like kind of equivalent stature to Lord Atiśa.
Lama te le karjabares. Shedo ngeshi toba yabodures.
Yes.
Ina yo te toba le. Lor chaswal pachaja tinga gawatsu.
Chendang ngeshi chen sana karare. Oh, Chen. Oh, right. Chen. Right. So the Lama replied that in terms of achieving the 5 eyes, the 6 types of clairvoyance and so forth, these are very useful. But if you were to ask me if I prefer those clairvoyances or placing an imprint for the entire path of lamp of the path for enlightenment in the mind, I prefer to place an imprint of the lamp of the path. So that's really something that is important to mull over, to think about, something that's immediately applicable to us. And another thing to keep in mind is that we've all achieved clairvoyance in previous lifetimes at one point or another. We've achieved the 5 eyes in previous lifetimes at one time or another. So that's not, from that perspective, it's not kind of something that's like so incredibly special. But did achieving those types of clairvoyance bring us lasting any benefit now? How's our mind now? And also to keep in mind that achieving many types of clairvoyance, that achievement is lost in the subsequent lifetime. So it's also something that's unstable. If our development of the different types of eyes, of the different types of clairvoyance, is not closely fused to our striving towards liberation, to our striving in bodhicitta to achieve the enlightenment for all sentient beings, it's not going to be particularly effective. So then, of course, we talk about the importance of calm abiding here. It's certainly very important. But if we were to kind of measure up what is more pressing, developing single-pointed concentration or placing an imprint for the path of enlightenment into one's mind, one could make the argument that actually placing the imprint for the entire path to enlightenment in one's mind is more important.
tupa share mamo yo was jingol mi pa tempo de ka chembo do res
Yeah.
tupa share ka chembo de chu jibol azu ja de ga ina azu mase te kan di do yo ha ko ma isa lo yo zo lo ro cha zo lo sha go chena
Yeah.
ani o mi pa tempo so no yo ga res.
So, you know, many holy beings explain meditation from this perspective, right? That, of course, single-pointed concentration on a single object is very important, but we don't know how many years, months, or days we have left in this life. And if we're pushing on that one object and don't achieve realization for it, but miss out on the chance to put a complete imprint for the path to enlightenment, the stages of the path within our mind, that is a great loss. This is why, even conjoined with calm abiding, a glance meditation on the Lam Rim is really recommended. So that's something, you know, really important for us to keep in mind. Yeah. So Geshe-la's, you know, recommendation, he said, for those of you who maybe are thinking about like how do I apply this? So what you would do is you would take a very short Lam Rim text, for example, Songs of Experience, and you would try to do a short glance meditation on that every session, even if you were focusing on developing concentration on a single object.
So
you know, if you could, for example, develop clarity about the sequence of 10 important topics within your mind, and then slowly increase that to encompass more and more topics, this is developing a powerful imprint. So that's why if you become familiar with the works of Lama Tsongkhapa, for example, you'll see that many of his texts include an outline, right? And those outlines are the first thing to memorize, because it's not necessarily possible to remember a whole long text like that, but the outlines can be very beneficial.
And
so Geshe-la finds from his own experience, right, that sometimes when he has free time, when he's kind of like waiting for something to happen, because he's remembered these outlines, he can take that moment to go through the outlines in his mind and refresh his understanding. And, you know, in that way, he kind of really enjoys those empty moments. If you have though access through memory to those outlines, then it's very easy to get rid of, you know, the unhappy, the unwholesome thoughts that may arise during empty moments and replace them with something more positive. So also, many people who struggle with insomnia, right? Part of that is the freak out response to insomnia of, oh my gosh, it's this and this time now. Oh, am I ever going to be able to fall asleep? And that makes it worse and worse. If you have the outlines in your mind and you can go through those, this places the mind in a calm state. And often one can drift off to sleep peacefully. So when we speak of bodhicitta, what are sort of the quotes and the outlines that are most effective for arising bodhicitta and so forth? You know, this can be really helpful.
Oh yeah, that's just what you so good.
So good. So verse number 39, as long as the requisites for shamatha are weak, even if you were to meditate with great effort for thousands of years, still you would not accomplish samadhi. So prerequisites we can understand here in a very easy way. The prerequisites for achieving calm abiding are our training in ethical conduct, specifically the ethics of avoiding the 10 non-virtues, and our ability to develop contentment and little desire. If we don't have a foundation in ethics, as well as contentment and little desire, it will be very difficult to develop our calm abiding.
아니 세네디피 타 세네피 타 게세아노 아니 녀방가 녀보제 사 대지 니 민지 다 서서 세를 보지고요.
And so one of the, outlines that would be really beneficial for you to have an idea of, the sequence within your mind, would be the 9 stages of calm abiding, as well as the list of the 5 faults and their 8 antidotes. So Geshe said recently, we kind of gave a course where he went through these steps in kind of a very rough way, but as we come to our second topic in the fall stages of meditation, he plans to give more in-depth instructions on concentration. So now we will turn for a few moments to the 14th Dalai Lama stages of the path and the 5th Dalai Lama's oral transmission of Mañjuśrī. If one has Shuna,
Puma di chachi pi ngwan dena poche jasiji diri chlo tawa manipa loti jasiji mendoli la.
So we are on page 91 in this text for those of you who are following. So kind of halfway down, if one has the opportunity to listen to or teach the Dharma, one should first recite the mantra subjugating demons that prevents them coming within 100 leagues, as said in the sutra requested by Sagaramati.
So Geshe
said that actually we don't do these kind of elaborate recitations as recommended here, but you'll notice that in each of our Sunday sessions, for example, we do a little bit of recitation, a little bit of chanting. So that is done for an important purpose. So the important thing to understand too, right, is that the holy beings who help us, whether the Buddha, whether Tara, whether Mañjuśrī, they are kind of like always here, waiting to help. We should be clear on that. Yeah. So the Tibetan name for Chenrezig, right, it kind of encompasses one of Chenrezi's features, which is his unwinking gaze, right? He is always gazing upon sentient beings, aware of their needs, waiting for when he can help them. So if we put a little bit of effort from our side, we should have no doubt that there are holy beings who are waiting and willing to help us. So it's a little bit like we often speak of the hooks of compassion of these holy beings, right? So they are kind of always waiting to bring us in with the hooks of their compassion. But from our side, we need to create a space where they can put that hook, so that they're able to help us. So we have all of these beings that are waiting to help us, right? But we also have the demons or the maras. And one of the important maras that we talk about is the Deva Putra Mara, or the Mara son of the gods. So what is the Deva Putra Mara thinking? Well, he's kind of like one of the rulers of the desire realm. So the Deva Putra Mara is thinking, if this being is able to engage in virtue and develop concentration, then they'll leave this desire realm and go to higher realms and other places beyond. So I'll lose one of my subjects. So I have to do something to try to keep him or her here.
어따때 로지 뭐뭐요 아래테네 뭐뭐시 뭐가 지금 안조 빼놨다 소소소 따져서 다 거기 왔어. 아니 거스 잡아 이나 시고 마요와. 다스야 소소 다 던지가 서울 대바 이나 자리 차소소서 가지고 바제트네 래 거기 왔어.
So we see this from our own experience as practitioners, don't we? We kind of get so excited about the time that we set aside to meditate, and then when we sit down, the mind is nothing but kind of a mess of confusion and lack of clarity. Or we get ourselves all excited about the retreat that we're going to do, and then as soon as the retreat begins, immediately we have someone or something creating obstacles, right? So all of us have experienced that. So in excellent explanations by Lama Tsongkhapa, he speaks of the Devaputra Mara, and he's almost like a Cupid figure, actually, when you see what he looks like. And it said that in his bow, he has different arrows. And Lama Tsongkhapa, J. Rinpoche, says he has 5 arrows. So we actually can't remember all of them, but 3 of those 5 arrows are the arrows of attachment, anger, and doubt. And you know, also we see that the Devaputra Mara and those other kind of sort of godlike beings or celestial beings, they're also constantly kind of in conflict. So if we can do that, right? If we can recite this mantra mentioned here, that's something very useful. Now, I hadn't looked this up, but I will look it up on 84,000, and if I can find that, I will. If it's been translated already, I'll post that. Geshe's also explained that mantra of the perfection of wisdom, Tayata Gate Gate Paras, Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. That is more than sufficient to serve the purposes here. But remember, if you're using a mala, a rosary, when you recite that mantra to dispel obstacles, you have to kind of roll the rosary away from you, away from you. And that represents pushing all of the obstacles away from you to a distance. And actually, if you have a little bit more time reciting the Heart Sutra at the beginning of your session, there's nothing more powerful than that for dispelling obstacles. So in all of the great monasteries and nunneries of Tibetan Buddhism, regardless of which of the lineages or sects that they belong to, they don't think of any more powerful way to conquer obstacles than the recitation of the Heart Sutra and the 21 praises Tattara. So, and in fact, when there's longer rituals, when there's a morning prayer assembly or an evening prayer assembly, it's so often the recitation of the Heart Sutra and the 21 taras is incorporated into whatever is happening. So Geshe was saying that near Chikdan. So Geshe was saying that in Tibet, actually, they had to recite the 21 praises, sometimes even like 100 times, many recitations. But since they came to India, then they don't do as many as they used to. They still do it, but not as many as they used to. And so it says that here as well. However, since it is possible one is not successful in reciting the mantra correctly, the Heart Sutra must be recited 3 times as a substitute. So you know, these practices are effective not only for developing our positive mental qualities, but also if we have something on the temporary level, something that we need to accomplish in our life, and we need to clear away obstacles, they can be very effective for that as well.
losawa nola yoyu ke zati gegeji tonga tarwi jede don ane lachi jamungwa sus.
So continuing, next one should perform in sequence supplications to the entirety of the stages of the path lineage gurus, from the Buddha to one's root guru, up to and including the mandala offering. It is not sufficient that beginners be taught practice manuals in the manner of a teacher giving finger-pointing explanations. That is, textual exegesis, difficult word, exegesis, in which certain parts are emphasized and other parts left aside. Simple and easy dharma of vague explanations. So critiquing that.
Tutaba ji shwale cheja tatwala rungzi zheme mababi lodi ji shimo jeba ned chego.
Those listening to the Dharma should take it to heart as they are being introduced to their own minds, investigating if their mental attitudes during a 24-hour period accord with the intention of the scriptures as taught by the Guru. Otherwise, there is a huge disconnect between our mind and the Dharma. It is not helpful for taming our minds.
Ta kawen yongyen ju se kawa yina yon es chushuni ju de chatswa kawe tara kari yina yon pi si wosh ta si wozo ka kachimore.
So the teacher's duty really, and in a session that is complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end, he or she has to strive to present the complete path to the students, including some of the more evident and some of the more subtle aspects of that. That is their duty.
This way.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I'm just covering a few points in that text today. So we'll leave it there, and we'll recite the dedications. And afterwards, if you need to get on with your day, please feel free. And
ta tari ngazo shochu loje ka yina ta yima de shochu loje de chasuma ale Lama mande ne jang is ni de ya
kaju ngazo tsule
ta ji ya kan
yeah oh yeah chatsangwa gyune jongimbe
yeah chasuma
so just Geshe said, for people who are thinking of coming next week, he wants to be able to, if he can, finish the text on the lamp for the path to enlightenment. So because we're going to be breaking, and we'll be starting with the Bodhisattva-Charyavatara and the Heart Sutra in September. So that's Geshe-la's plan for September. We'll start with the Bodhisattva-Charyavatara and the Heart Sutra. So it will be the last session of this one until we come back to it, right? Remember, we're doing 4 topics and circling back. So he'd like to try next Sunday to go through the entire Lamp of the Path by Atiśa, whatever is remaining, if he can.
And
so then, of course, when we come back to this particular topic in our cycle of 4, we'll be continuing with this text, the oral transmission of Mañjuśrī, and then maybe taking another side text, but also revisiting essential aspects of that Lamp of the Path. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll dedicate the merits. If afterwards you need to get on with your day, please feel free. If you'd like to hang for question and answer, please feel free as well.
Changjo Samjo Rinpoche Maje Panam Chejo Rechi Chewan Yamba Meba Yang Gone Gongdu Pewa Shu Tongni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Panam Chejo Rechi Cheba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Shu Jambe Pao Jita Jemba No Kundu Sampo Deyan Deshin Deda Kungi Jesu Dalo Che Kewa Dida Tamshe Rabdu Ngo Dusu Shebe Kewa Tamshe Ge Ngowa Gangra Chodo Ngaba De Dagi Kewe Tsawa Digun Kyang Zambu Jilji Rabdu Ngowa.
우리가 관계가 와가로 소요나이티 니파라테 뭐게 마주 내요 거기는 가리나 봐셔가지.
So through the merits accumulated by myself and others by their power, may all wars, conflicts, diseases, strife be completely cleared away.
너는 로와리 줄다 리치강이 센지강 가로 이나요 파시잖냐 손바요 뭐시에터네.
May the mental and physical suffering of all 6 types of sentient beings be completely cleared away. And with that cleared away, may they only bring forth minds of loving kindness.
니가 대시 다투게 대시 반점하셔야지.
May the sun of temporary and ultimate happiness shine with equality on all beings.
왜?
So we'll pause there.
개와 맵이 sensitive 메시지가 알았어. 맞아.
Mhm.
대이자 강가를 내봐요 알았어.
So there's not a single sentient being that completely lacks any virtuous potential whatsoever. That's why when we pray for all sentient beings, it means something.
대대에서 니바티 체르도 토소나. 너네 갈래갈래 쓰이나요 뭐 저는 알았어.
Because no matter how fallen they may seem, if they are able to identify that imprint which is positive within them and slowly, slowly build that up, they can come to a good result. So we shall leave it here. Just give me a moment to turn up the volume and we will take questions. So Geshe said that, people are often asked about, well, what's the most powerful form of purification? Remember that love, compassion, bodhicitta, and wisdom are like the fire that can burn through the dry grass of what is unwholesome. There is an end to our unwholesome or negative karma. When do we see an end to that unwholesome or negative karma? When those negative potentials have been burned like seeds that are scorched and unable to sprout. Then only happiness is experienced. Then that is a very great benefit, isn't it? Questions? I think I heard someone's voice already, so whoever that was, go ahead.
So I don't know if anybody else has got a question, but I have one.
Go for it, Dave. You can go first. Other people can go after.
Okay. Yeah, there isn't so far anything on social media, but the question I have is regarding the benefits of for aiding others, the approach of clairvoyance, knowing others' minds versus reasoning. So I can see how reasoning can help oneself, but it seems that one might struggle to use reasoning to help somebody else if you don't understand their situation.
Okay, yes. Nganso ngunche dang rigpa nigi nang ne rigpa chok dafore duas di soso pentok to yena peshe gyumsen yores ine mi jenda grokpa shiagi depa yena ngunche yaga mindro karinsena samsam rigpa la tene konso kamdang mepa dang poronso ginesu yewache tugimindua. So his answer is a question back to you, Dave. If you possess clairvoyance, but you're not able to give that person a line of reasoning that helps them solve their problems, how useful is the clairvoyance?
Yeah, I met a clairvoyant once who said it's really difficult when you know something's going to happen, but you can't do anything about it.
Ngunshi yugenchik maumba mi nesu dendre chungire sine soso girotang tuki mendus semshuk mepada semshuk chadro gire duas. Exactly. So then wouldn't it be the case that in such a situation, even with clairvoyance, if you saw that path the person was following, but you were able to use really solid reasons to help them see another way, wouldn't that be something that's beneficial?
Pena
Yeah.
tuma ni to sonju sengolo ri pa tembo se pagel esa sona te shewa shamando ri la ko nyondo ko to ma du tembo ro duas.
And, you know, if you were able to use reasons that could even help them develop positive mental qualities like love, like compassion, or bodhicitta, not only would you be able to help them solve the problem of that lifetime, they would also be solving the problem of future lifetimes.
Xie dong ye shi ge nyemo ma se tama ge nyemo shu to bo ji le ngo de ge ko to nyomba so to duas.
Kind of.
Xie dong ye shi
Yeah, tobna.
ma to na yo.
Yeah.
Ma se tama la
Yeah.
de bin de shang ye de le ge de shu to bo le ge de ko nyondo ya.
So the other thing that bears mentioning here, although not directly related to the question, it kind of bears mentioning here is that these types of clairvoyance, right, whether the 5 eyes or the 6 types of super knowledge, as one goes through the death process, if a strong attachment or other affliction arises, that capacity for clairvoyance and so forth is destroyed. So one does not take the attainment of that into subsequent lifetimes. So that's something to think about as well.
Ta te a ju te mo ta te de yes. Ta ina yo ta nyondo chu na. Ta le be pe do chambo de da.
But the very best, of course, would be to have both.
Yes.
To have the clairvoyance to discern the needs and the reasoning to help guide the person.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dave. You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question? Carol, go ahead.
I'd probably just add the story you gave of the imprints, that the old man who wanted to get ordained, right?
Yeah.
That was a clairvoyance story. Or I mean, you could make the assumption that everybody has the potential, but in the story, Buddha wasn't giving that, saying everyone has the potential, which comes from logic. You use the example of, oh, I saw him as a fly. So the example that was supposedly to show, or maybe it wasn't supposed to show about the valid reasoning compared to the clairvoyance, but maybe there's another story that does show a comparison between the valid reasoning and the clairvoyance, because that one has a different kind of twist.
So, okay, let me just say back to you what I understood. So you're saying that we had the story about this man who wanted to become a monk, right? And Moggallana and Shariputra tried to block him because their clairvoyance couldn't perceive that he had the seed of virtue necessary to become a monk. But the Buddha, who possessed the superior clairvoyance, he was able to see that in a lifetime, many eons ago, during a previous Buddha, that monk was a fly in a pile of cow dung that got sort of washed in a circumambulation around the stupa. But that doesn't seem to show the power of reasoning. That's showing the power of clairvoyance. So is there another story that shows the power of reasoning? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because the Buddha could have said, well, everybody has the potential.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right, Carol. I'll put it to Geshe. Then nanso numa di bachuki sokpala di buchi gyore dene dela tene ko numa bakchak trapachea gi bakchak chik yores tomba chomdende sungsua. Ine di nunche latene hako tsaredua. Ine rikpa latene rikpa so daputsina dene tomba chomdende misuyena nanzo ngoa dapochik misuyena yapochikyang mepa yomares misuyena nangla nupa yapochikyores chetsanko chapache tugires dikare cheneshimas.
Tate nyondo tuni la roas. Mengeshi dunya ripa ni nyondo tuni la roas.
Yeah. Ale sangegi. Ale ripa kadila sutene. Ko kewa nguma disun smato jana disumasu.
Meshiwa ngama sena tenda ripa dunya kala ten yumi la roas. Sonjiga.
Ale.
Geshi chibo keta mandi was.
Ninche chipo res.
Ripa senje yuto ta chewo du nipa yoba de kanga yom.
So sorry, Carol, I'm debating with Geshe a little bit related to your question. So Geshe is saying that it was both, right? Like So the Buddha named a very specific potential that that particular person had to become a monk. But, we could also use the reason that, as we said in the dedication, there's no being that lacks any kind of positive potential whatsoever, right? Even if it's very kind of deeply hidden, everybody has that. So then, so that's a given. And then I sort of pushed back. I said, well, Geshe, the Buddha didn't say that, right? The Buddha related the previous lifetime story. And he said, yes, but we can use logic to determine that that's also a given. And that's also a way of how we can understand the story, right? That particular instance was given, but everyone has the potential to possess a similar merit. And the Buddha possesses both, right? So he possesses not just like clairvoyance, but omniscience, which means perfect clairvoyance and perfect reasoning both, right? So yeah, he can present things from both angles. But really the point to kind of take from this story is the limits of clairvoyance, because that's a caveat that's not given enough. And the limit were that Shariputra and Moggallana, these were foe destroyers, very close disciples of the Buddha and foe destroyers, yet they still tried to block this man, right? They didn't have the capacity the Buddha did to see what was there.
Well, could you say there's monastic politics at every level?
Di trabagi chapsi res Moggallana dang Shariputra koya tauche chene? Midi migaya dang den so Yeah, it was a misunderstanding rather than politics. They didn't think that he had the potential to achieve liberation for whatever reason. Yeah.
So
Semshin suya na tarpa gisabun yure segi. So I said to Geshe, well, don't all beings possess the seed for liberation? He said, yes. But
so how come they didn't know that?
Konso semshin chatsang o tarpa gisabun yure skarichene hakumasons Moggallana dang Shariputra. Because they were still foe destroyers, right? They weren't fully developed disciples. They didn't possess the knowledge and understanding that the Buddha possessed.
I'm saying, how come they didn't know that everybody had the potential? But the potential to be ordained and the potential to be enlightened are two different things.
Okay. Nganso tarpa tobyagi sabun dang chapa dang ane chiagi sabun minjawa da bochi gres kande samutang.
Memita tedo marawa chimoro was to tava ane chaya sabedo ko ta karseka. Intimate tochi gumarwas. Because Tabalra Sabebu marawa was.
Well, actually, the seed that's required to become a monk or a nun is not as powerful a seed as is required to actually be able to reach liberation. So we can turn to another story. We can think of the attendant of the Buddha, Ananda, and Ananda was said to have two nephews. And one of those two nephews had a real burning problem with attachment, right? He had a perturbation of attachment much more than most human beings experience. So clairvoyance here was helpful because Geshe thinks it was the Buddha, although it may have been one of the Buddha's disciples who possessed clairvoyance. So they showed this nephew of Ananda the beautiful form of a goddess of the form realm. And her form so exceeded the beauty of the beautiful women of the desire realm that when he came back to the desire realm, he wasn't as captivated by that beautiful form. So clairvoyance helped him to show him that.
Oh, that kind of was that was the let's say
and that's how he was encouraged into ordination. It was said that, if you ordain and practice concentration You will create the cause to be reborn in the form realm, where the beauty of the inhabitants greatly exceeds the beauty of what we perceive in the desire realm. So it was a little bit of kind of a minor goal posited to encourage him to set out on the path. So we can't say that that's a fantastic motivation. Of course we can't, it's not a great motivation, but it was enough of an impetus to get him to step out of his kind of previous problem and take ordination and start to work towards something better. So what happened was, Ananda's nephew, he became a monk, right? He went forth, and then he started to meditate. And then he was guided to see that even if we're reborn in a high Deva realm of the form realm, for example, eventually our merit will deplete and will be required to go back to lower realms of samsara. At that point, he was able to produce the definite emergence. He was able to produce genuine renunciation.
Yeah.
And so, just to be clear too, seeing the drawbacks of this desire realm and the benefits of the form realm is a practice that is valid and a practice that is actually shared by both Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions, right? So it's a beginning point. We couldn't say that this is the method for disciples of sharp faculties, but it is a method which gives access of the path to those of more limited faculties. I think we'll leave it there, Carol, but if you want to come back, but I see a hand, and I'm sorry, my eyes are not great, so I can't see who's got the hand, but whoever has the yellow hand, please go ahead.
Ita, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just one short.
We can't hear you.
Shoot.
And now?
Yeah,
Yep.
now.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for translation. I have just a short question, curiosity.
Sure.
What is Chenpo and what is Sangye?
Sangye.
Sangye.
Sanjay or Sangye. Yeah. So Geshe and I often speak in the Kam dialect. So Sangye is Buddha, and in the Kam dialect, it sounds more like Sanjay. So when we say Sanjay, it means Buddha.
And Chenpo?
Chenpo is great, big.
Thank you. It was curiosity, and without clairvoyance.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Another question is because many times in the teachings, it's very emphasized to achieve by mind emptiness.
Yep.
And today we talk a lot of calm abiding in samatha training.
Yeah.
And this 9 step of samatha.
Yeah.
In my knowledge from Theravada, more Theravada, there is 4 samatha steps, and next 4 is formless.
Yes.
This 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th they are already this formless. Which one is this infinite space, infinite consciousness, and one is an infinite emptiness.
Okay.
I would like to understand if important of samatha training is exactly if it's much this samatha training to reach this samatha.
So I think I understood you, but I don't see your question in there. To be honest.
If this emptiness, infinite emptiness from samatha training matches from which we emphasize.
Oh, you're asking. So you're asking if if the name that's given to one of these 4 formless realm states of calm abiding, that's called infinite emptiness, is the same as the emptiness that Geshe is talking about. Is that what you're asking?
Exactly.
Okay, I got you. Nganso di tek megi nangula rua shine gomya di rua dene sem mambochik kochana ngapa chupa dumpa jeba guyore rua ngapa gotsu ne dinso kandisla gre nganso dekam gisem mares dinso sukam dang supme kam gisem dene tingins in yaru drone nganso sukam gisem chik togire dua sukam gisem chik Mingdi yores, tompa gisem, tek meyena, tompa gisem, chik yores. Tompa di dan Geshe labia gi tompa, kandislagore, ngosu tope shera gi tompa ni di chik parebes.
nga chena batende mares. Ane, chato se ne ganduas. Sene guten devi se res. Tomani basama jwa nga ba chupa gwa pada.
Yeah.
Tama den devi se noni tama res.
So he doesn't think so, because actually in his understanding, as we go through these 9 stages of abiding, those are all minds of the desire realm until you get to the very last one, which is the 9th abiding. Then at the 9th abiding, one begins to achieve a level of concentration beyond the desire realm. Only then. So at that point, at the point that the 9th abiding is reached, then one begins to experience mental and physical pliancy. And once mental and physical pliancy is achieved, only then, in the understanding of our tradition, has one really achieved shamatha, or calm abiding. That's actually the measure of it. And that is not a mind of the desire realm, right? This is a mind beyond the desire realm, certainly. And you can say it's empty in terms of it's empty of the faults of laxity and excitement. So Geshe hasn't seen the text of your tradition, but maybe that's what they mean by empty. That's why they're calling those attainments empty. Because it's empty in the sense of the mental projections are no longer able to cause any disturbance in the mind. But that's not the way that Geshe intends emptiness to be understood when he usually speaks about it. So we can certainly talk about calm abiding placed on emptiness for a high level or advanced practitioner. Certainly we can speak about that. Ine tompa seria tompa konso shine gi mingchi tompa la gre do di so tompa ni mare di rangshin mepa gi tompa ni di se boso gre mata kogo tomsa dire do. Yes. So when we speak of emptiness, it's the emptiness of inherent existence, the emptiness of things existing from their own side. That's what emptiness means.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That is very, very, very important. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I did see another yellow hand as well. There was a gentleman. Did we lose him? I think, yeah. I can't see your name, sir. I'm sorry. You're in a white t-shirt. Yeah. Go ahead, sir. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's Dave.
Oh, is that you? Okay.
Yes.
I need new glasses, obviously. Sorry about that, Dave. So have we covered
There's a question. There's a question in the chat.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let's do that one then.
Let me go find the chat. Pardon me. Do you mean, okay, do Kirim and Zogrim achieve these levels of calm abiding?
Kirim dang Zogrim la tene shine negu toptu girebesa. Absolutely. Not only do the generation and completion stage allow us to achieve calm abiding, they allow us to achieve the union of calm abiding and special insight of shamatha and vipassana very easily. In Sutra, there's kind of a division, right? And it says for the ultimate realization of vipassana or special insight that one has to achieve calm abiding first. But actually, one doesn't need to kind of cultivate Shine with the same kind of particular intention and push in Tantra, because the natural process of engaging in deity yoga and developing divine pride will allow Shine to unfold naturally, right, with much less exertion. It's one of the big benefits of the generation stage, actually. Oh, Jason. So I guess I just want to make sure that we've covered everybody, and if we have, I guess we can leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for hosting, and thank you everybody so much for coming. And so just as a reminder, next Sunday will be our last Sunday for a couple of weeks while Geshe is teaching in the Netherlands, and next Sunday he's going to try and see if we can finish the lamp for the path to enlightenment, and then we'll all gather back again second weekend of September. Take care, everyone.
And stay tuned for teaching with Yongten Rinpoche.
Yes, sorry. So we've confirmed that the teaching is happening. We just need to pin down the time and whatnot. So unfortunately, of course, Yongten Rinpoche is pretty fully booked when he's here, so it may be in an evening, but we do have the permission to record that and make it available to everyone. So we'll try and make it as available to everyone as we can. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.